and anything else, what I and my colleague, Dr. Eileen Riley, have been trying to do. So the young lady, call her Linda, not her real name, but in the north of England, early in January 2021, I got a phone call or a WhatsApp message from the American Heartbeat International Abortion Reversal Helpline, and most of the calls came through that way, 80% of them through that method. But it was 11:20 on a Saturday night. She said a young woman somewhere in the north of England had taken the first abortion pill, mifepristone, and deeply regretted her decision, and she was desperately looking for help. She'd already been back to her abortion provider, who told her, sorry, there's nothing you can do, you'd have to speak to your own GP after the weekend. So in desperation, as almost all of the girls who contacted us did, she went to the internet, typed in abortion reversal, and got Heartbeat International helpline. And then either by email or by phone call, they contact this helpline. And they're told, yeah, we have one or two doctors in the UK who might be able to give you some help, but keep in mind, time difference, it's quite late in the UK. So this is 11:20 on a Saturday night. And the young lady, Linda, had already done her homework, which was great, because she had looked up, are there any pharmacies in her town that might still be open? And there weren't. They were all closed, 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, whatever. But she found that there was in a larger city, a little bit 30 miles away, there was a pharmacy that was still open that might be able to help her. And then I rang, after I discussed the situation with Linda, got her consent for what we were going to do, gave her very honestly, the chance of success, the chances of not being successful, because she was 5 weeks and 2 days pregnant. She had an ultrasound scan the previous day, and she was 5 weeks and 2 days, which is very, very early. And with abortion reversal, the later in pregnancy, the better is the chance of success. So I told all the girls that there was about a 50 to 60% chance of survival, that our baby might survive with the treatment that we could offer them. So definitely not 100%. But it was better than doing nothing. But without progesterone treatment, was what we offer, the chance of success will be well below 20%. So we can double or more than double the chance of success of our baby surviving. So she'd done her homework. She gave me the pharmacy in question. I rang them, and luckily they had progesterone in stock, because that doesn't always happen. There have been occasions where I've had to ring 35 pharmacies before I found one that actually had progesterone in stock. But the pharmacist said to me, where's she coming from? And I told her, oh, she's not going to make it. We close at 12. And this was 20 to 12 at this stage. And I thought, well, okay, well, she's really, she's on her way. And so luckily, Linda on her way, or her partner, who was very supportive, which was great, because that again doesn't always happen, but her partner was driving her to the pharmacy in question. And she was able to phone while they were nearly there. So 10 to 12, she phoned them to say, we're nearly there, we're only about 6 miles away, any chance you could stay up in just a few extra minutes. This is a matter of life and death. And the pharmacist, to be, in gratitude to him, stayed open until about 12:15 when she arrived. She got her treatment, and she started treatment that night, and then took her next dose the next morning, so on continued. She had to continue treatment up to 15 weeks. So the aim of the treatment, when we started early in the first trimester, is to get them through to at least past 14 weeks, because at that stage, if the baby has survived, there's a very good chance that the baby is going to, it's exactly the same as any other normal pregnancy if they can get to 15 weeks. And luckily, she started her treatment, and I think around September, October, her baby was born, or her little baby was born, the little girl, successfully, without any complications. And that was pretty typical. The only unique circumstance about that was the race against the clock. Because if she had not got a pharmacy open that night, it would have been another 12 hours. Sunday morning, getting pharmacies open at 8, 9, 10 o'clock is not easy. So she had to wait probably till 10, 11, 12 o'clock before she could have started treatment. And that could have made the huge difference. Right, Julia? So we were very lucky in that particular situation. And that's a good example of what myself and Dr. Riley had been doing. As a lot of you probably know, most abortions nowadays take place by medications to induce miscarriage. So the first drug given is mifepristone, which blocks the action of progesterone. Progesterone is an essential hormone for maintaining pregnancy, and mifepristone blocks that action. That's why we give progesterone in the hope that it'll basically outnumber the mifepristone molecules in the mother's body, and will help to save the pregnancy by binding to the progesterone receptors, blocking the mifepristone. The same way the mifepristone blocked progesterone, we're hoping that the progesterone can block the mifepristone by competing directly with it. So they'll take the first drug that very often kills the baby. Second drug is mifepristone, which is to complete the pregnancy, causing uterine or womb contraction and expelling the baby and the other products of conception at the same time, usually taken 1 or 2 days later, according to the instructions of the abortion people. So that offers a window of opportunity. So while abortion is always a terrible thing, the intention of abortion is always to kill, to end the life of an innocent, defenseless human being at a very early stage of their life. At least with the medical abortion, while it's still terrible, there is that just window of opportunity that even if the process has been started, there is a slight chance, at least in some cases, that the abortion can be reversed and the baby can be saved. Whereas in a surgical abortion, once the process has started, there's no going back. So it offers this window of opportunity, and some doctors in the United States recognise this, and almost came about by accident in around 2007, 2008. 2 different doctors on both sides of the country, one in California, the other in North Carolina, either North or South Carolina, I think it was North Carolina, just almost around the same time were asked, could they help women in 2 separate situations, unknown to each other, who had taken the first abortion pill, and could they do anything to try and help them, because these women now regret what they'd done. And knowing what they knew about progesterone and how the abortion pills worked, they thought, well, at least in theory, if I give progesterone, it might help to save the baby. And in both cases it worked. They gave progesterone, or they advised whoever was looking after the woman to give progesterone, and in both cases the babies were saved. The abortion providers tried to tell us that, well, that's going to happen anyway. But we know from the studies that have been done. First of all, when the abortion pills, mifepristone in particular, was introduced, the company that make it, Roussel Youclaf, claimed that drug alone, that there was a 90% chance, or close to 90% chance, that abortion will be complete, even without misoprostol. I'm not sure where they got those figures from. But we know from follow-up studies that at 15 days, because there's not many children who survive abortion pill that are allowed to live. But most of them, if the abortion is unsuccessful, they'll end up having a surgical abortion. So we know that if both abortion pills are taken, the mifepristone followed by the misoprostol, there's a 98 to 99% chance that the baby will not survive if both drugs are taken. If the mother takes the first abortion pill, mifepristone, but doesn't take the second abortion pill, misoprostol, for some reason she's either can't get it or she's changed her mind but doesn't know how to get any other help. If she doesn't take the second abortion pill but doesn't get progesterone, there is a less than 20 to 25% chance. And that's at 15 days. It's not up to birth. So the studies looking at this have shown that up to 15 days is about a 20 to 25% chance that the baby might survive. I suspect it's a lot less than that if those were followed on up to birth. If the mother takes the mifepristone, changes her mind, doesn't take misoprostol, the second drug, but if she manages to get progesterone, what we offer, the abortion reversal treatment, within 72 hours of taking the first drug, now the sooner the better, but even up to 72 hours is still worthwhile, there's a greater than 50% chance that the baby will survive. And that's to birth, not to 15 days. To 15 days it's well over that, at least from our own records, it's about 70-75% to 15 days, but to actual birth, 50 to 55%. By any medical emergency standard, that's staggering. There are not many interventions in medicine where you can, in emergency situations, where you can actually double or more than double the survival rate of whoever you're trying to treat. The abortion pill people, of course, or the abortionists, will dispute all this. So first of all, there's 3 big lies that we need to be aware of. The first is that, number one, they said there's no need for this. Women don't change their mind, and that was the original complaint that they tried to introduce, particularly in the United States, but then it took off over here. Women don't change their mind. If they're decided they're going to have an abortion, they're going to have an abortion. But we know that that's not true. I don't know what the figures are, but at least in this country, I think you still have the 3-day waiting period, where we don't have that in the UK. But we know that some women do change their mind. Could be up to 10% if they were allowed, without pressure and coercion from others. The second lie they introduced was, yeah, women might change their mind, we accept that, but this treatment doesn't work. Those babies that are survived, we're going to survive anyway. But we know that that's not true. We know that survival rate is well below 25%, probably well below 20% if you take it to full term. And we know that with the treatment that we and others can offer, we can get that well over 50%. Over 3,000 babies have been born in the United States since a formal program was established. So those first cases that I mentioned in California, Carolina, 2007, 2008. 2012, the US had established a full abortion reversal program, which has been going for more than 10 years now. And they've well over, there must be close to 4,000 at this stage. They're getting roughly 300 to 400 babies per year have been saved after the mothers had taken mifepristone, changed their mind, and then got progesterone. So that's definitely a high success rate there. So the latest argument has been, well, okay, women, some may want it, yeah, it does work, yeah, we accept that, but it's dangerous. You know, the women are going to die. This is reckless behaviour. And again, there isn't any evidence for that. They tried to show or portray one trial that was established purely with the intention of showing that this medication didn't work. But the trial was stopped early on the pretense that it was dangerous because 3 women bled out of 12 women who had been recruited, 3 of them had bleeding. 2 of them had received placebo, 1 had received progesterone. I'm not going into the full details of it, but basically what the trial was starting to show, even though it was only small numbers, was that progesterone was doubling the success rate. So of the 10 women who stayed in the trial, and they were only went to 15 days, 4 out of 5 who received progesterone were still pregnant at 15 days, where 2 out of 5 who didn't receive progesterone were pregnant. So basically it showed that at 15 days it was demonstrating what we were already showing or claiming, that progesterone doubles the survival rate at least in those cases where the women get progesterone. And secondly, of the women who did have bleeding, those who got progesterone had half the incidence of bleeding compared to women who didn't get progesterone. And the woman who got progesterone had bleeding, her hemoglobin, her blood count didn't drop. She didn't need any blood transfusion or any resuscitation. She was just assessed, had her blood pressure and bloods recorded, and then sent home. So it was basically starting to show that in that trial that progesterone was doubling the survival rate and halving the serious complication rate. I suspect that the trial was stopped because the investigators didn't like what it was starting to show, because that was not their aim. The aim of the trial that they stated was to show that abortion reversal treatment does not work. And they obviously weren't too happy with their interim or their first analysis, so they had to find some way to not continue that trial. So the 3 myths of it's not needed, it's not effective, it's dangerous, have all been debunked at this stage. So on that basis, myself and Dr. Riley were very happy to provide the service, hoping that others would join us, and we didn't get many other volunteers along the way. And I really don't know why, because we had evidence, we had safety evidence, we had efficacy evidence. And then when, I won't mention the name here, but it actually almost came about by accident how we were able to provide the service, because on one occasion an English woman phoned the American helpline and said, I've taken the first pill, can you help me, I want to save my baby. And the Americans, probably not knowing that there was a difference politically between Ireland and England, thought, well, we don't have anybody in England, but we do have a doctor in Ireland, and I'm sure he'll be able to help you, but he's in the Republic of Ireland. So he had to apologise that, I'm sorry, I'm only allowed to prescribe within the jurisdiction of the Republic of Ireland, but I know someone in the UK who might be able to help, and he contacted Eileen Riley, and Eileen was able to get involved. And then Eileen told me, if I registered with this same abortion helpline, abortion pill reversal helpline, sorry, not abortion helpline, don't record that, abortion reversal helpline, that I could get involved in the same way. So up until then we were thinking we're going to have doctors all over the country, in every town and city, providing this reversal treatment for progesterone for women. But in a way we've adopted the measures that the abortion providers have adopted, and that we're using telemedicine. And that's it's acceptable. When we contact a pharmacist, we ask the pharmacist, do they have the medication in stock? And secondly, are they happy to accept an initial email prescription, which they all are, almost all are, there's 1 or 2 exceptions, and then receiving the actual handwritten prescription the next day or 2 days later. And that's worked very well. And then we send a copy of the same prescription to the mother, and she turns up, and everything is ready for her, usually within a half hour or so of the initial phone call, once the arrangements have been made. Myself and Dr. Riley, the story I mentioned about Lindis, that was one of 32 successes that we've had so far. There's 2 more babies, by the way, that are due to be born in the coming weeks, but 32 live, healthy births so far. No increased risk of complications, either for the mother or for the baby. Of the 32 we've had, it's almost the same number of failures though, and I have to say it's heartbreaking. It's really emotionally draining when the treatment doesn't work, and especially when it seems to be going fine. They get their first scan, the baby looks live and well and healthy, and then a week later they have a massive bleed and they lose the baby. That's really, really hard, and I almost give up, almost a couple of times give up, and I had 2 or 3 of them in succession where the treatment didn't work. But the other hidden or unseen importance of providing this service is the psychological benefit, maybe the spiritual benefit, but the extra benefit that it gives to the mother, knowing that she tried to save her baby. And without exception, in every case, even where the treatment has failed, the mother has been so grateful that somebody tried to help them. Because again, almost always they'd gone back to their abortion provider, where Mary Stopes or BPAS or some clinic, and they were told, nothing you can do. In some cases, told, your baby's already dead. Nobody would help. Some of them went to their GPs if it was during the week, if they could get a GP. Some of them went to emergency departments, A&E departments. Some of them went to walk-in centres, and they were all told everywhere, nothing you can do, is too late. Or you'll have to go back to the abortion provider, or you'll have to go to your GP. So they were going sent round in circles until they got either through the helpline or through some of the pro-life organisations like SPUC or Good Counsel. A couple of them came to us in those ways as well. So they were so grateful that somebody was prepared to give them some help. And we quote a success rate of 50-55%, and that's from the 32 babies that we've had and the others that we've lost. But we don't, I give a range because we don't know exactly what the success rate is, because I mentioned some of the babies we've lost have been quite late. So I counted up those that we've lost under 21 days. So from starting the treatment to miscarriage happening within 21 days was 17, and then another 4 were later than that, and 2 of them were actually over 42 days. So it's difficult to know, were they miscarriages that were probably going to happen anyway, regardless of whether the mother had received mifepristone or progesterone or anything else, or was it failed treatment. So we can't really say that these were failed treatments or successful treatments. So that's why when anyone asks me what was the success rate, I say, well, somewhere between 50 and 55%, possibly a little bit more if you're to include the ones that were late miscarriages that might have happened anyway. But those 32, they mean so much to us and to the mothers that that gave birth to them and to their families. Of course, not everybody liked what we were doing, and complaints were raised, not by any of the mothers, and that's very, very important. None of the mothers complained, even those who decided for whatever reason not to go with the treatment. Because we did have some that discussed it and said, oh, yeah, but I'm under so much pressure from my boyfriend, he's going to commit suicide if I don't have the abortion, or he's going to leave me, or he just wants rid of the baby, or from other sources. Or others where it was too late, where the mother was already heavily bleeding and it was 2 or 3 days since they'd taken the pill, and we felt it probably wasn't worthwhile going with the treatment. So there were reasons why some women didn't go ahead with treatment. And then one poor young girl, once she heard it wasn't an official NHS supported treatment, said, oh, sorry, I don't want anything to do with that. If it's not recognised by the NHS, and we had to accept that. We couldn't force these things on women who didn't want. There's no point trying. So if someone's ambivalent or not dedicated to saving the baby, there's no point trying to convince them otherwise, I think. But we did have complaints from Mary Stopes, from the Royal College of Obstetricians, and from a group called Open Democracy, all of whom have vested interest in abortion. Complained to the GMC that what we were doing was reckless, we were offering unlicensed medication to women. Now, the progesterone is licensed for, it's used in pregnancy in lots of cases. It's licensed for HRT, so there's lots of uses. So it is licensed, it's not unlicensed. We were using it off license. What the same complainants neglected to say was that misoprostol, the second abortion pill, is not licensed for abortion. It's licensed for management of peptic ulcer disease. It's not licensed for abortion, but it's used. And another drug called methotrexate, which is licensed for use in rheumatoid arthritis and other chronic inflammatory disorders. The Royal College of Obstetricians is very heavily promoting that for medical management of ectopic pregnancy, but it's not licensed for that indication. So these are all off-license uses, and there's lots of drugs that are used in that way. So a drug comes out, it's found to have a useful purpose for one thing, but then years later it's found, actually it's very useful in this situation as well. So it's used for other indications outside of its license. And that's allowable as long as the practitioner is aware of how it works, what the possible side effects are, and that he or she informs the patient about these, which we were doing anyway. So that was the first inconsistent or hypocritical complaint against us. Second was that we were prescribing remotely, that we weren't seeing these patients, we were prescribing remotely. Now, there are 230,000 abortions a year in the UK, or about over 230,000 this year, or 2021. And 87 to 90% of those are by medical abortion, and the vast majority of those are by telemedicine. So the practitioner, very often not even a doctor, will talk to a woman on the phone, doesn't even know if that's the woman that's pregnant. It could be her sister, her next door neighbour, the mistress of the man, whatever, that got her pregnant. So they talk to a person not knowing if they're pregnant, not knowing what stage of pregnancy they're on, and they're happily sending them these lethal drugs in the post. So telemedicine is widely used in the abortion industry, and yet that was one of the complaints brought against us, that we were using unlicensed medication in this reckless manner, using telemedicine without proper consultations with the women. Secondly, that we were imposing our Catholic beliefs on these women. Now, I never mentioned Catholic. Well, on one occasion, one of the women, a few days after she had started treatment, because I kept in contact with them on a regular basis to check that they were okay and whether they had any side effects and so on. And one girl just asked me once, so by the way, can I ask, are you a Catholic? Because her dad was a Catholic and she was just interested to know. And that's the only time the word Catholicism or religion ever came into any of the conversations. So there's absolutely no evidence to support any of the complaints made against us. The worst one, the best one of all was that I wasn't following the guidance on abortion provision, the nice guidance on how you should do abortions. But I wasn't providing. They might as well have said you weren't following the guidance on atrial fibrillation or rheumatoid arthritis, because I wasn't treating these women for this condition. It was purely for what they had requested. And they came voluntarily to us. We weren't going out seeking them. That they came, and if they decided they didn't want the treatment, we didn't go hounding them or pressurising them to go ahead with the treatment. So the complaints were taken up by the GMC. The GMC received the complaints from these groups, and unfortunately they endorsed all of them. They endorsed them. They had 10 listed complaints against me that they felt made me guilty of professional misconduct, and that I should be, the GMC wanted myself and Dr. Riley suspended, completely suspended, not able to do any medical practice. So we had to go to a tribunal, the Medical Practitioners Tribunal Service, and we had to go to this tribunal, well, both on the same day, but two separate hearings. I was represented by Christian Legal Centre, which turned out to be a great blessing. Eileen was represented by one of the secular medical protection bodies, which was okay, but didn't defend her or protect her in the same ways that I got protection. And at that, the tribunal felt that complete suspension was probably a bit extreme, that it was disproportionate to what we were being accused of. It was just this one area of medicine, and otherwise our records were unblemished, and also at the time of COVID, when they were bringing back doctors from the graveyard and things to get them back into medicine, they felt that this might not be a good idea. So they got us to accept the conditions attached to our practice. So we were still allowed to do our normal NHS work. I'm a cardiologist and a general physician in hospital in the North East, so I could still do that. Eileen could still do her obstetrics work in her local hospital. But we weren't allowed to do any voluntary work or any private work. And in my case, they added that I wasn't allowed to prescribe, administer, or recommend progesterone for abortion reversal. They didn't put that on Eileen's, interestingly, possibly because as an obstetrician they felt she might need to use progesterone in some situations. But I wasn't allowed to do that. So basically it stopped us from providing the service. So we had to stop from that moment on. And that lasted for several months. So those conditions or restrictions were imposed on the 12th of May 2021. And mine were lifted on the 18th of February 2022, this year. And in that 9-month period, we know that 167 women contacted the Heartbeat International helpline looking for reversal. 100 women from the UK and Ireland, 160 from the UK, 7 from Ireland, contacted the Republic of Ireland, contacted the Heartbeat services asking for help, that they had taken the first abortion pill, and there was nobody. The Heartbeat nurses had to apologise and say, we're very sorry, but at this stage, because of the actions of the GMC, that the General Medical Council, we cannot provide that service at present. Which was machine. Now, not all of those 167 women would have gone ahead with the treatment. We know from our own experience that probably maybe 100, 90, 95 might have gone ahead with the treatment. And of those who would have started treatment, another 20, 30 might have stopped the treatment because of pressure from someone else after, a certain point. And of those then who would have continued the treatment, some of the babies would have survived anyway. But I reckon there's probably 35 to 40 babies that are dead that would otherwise have survived if those restrictions had not been imposed upon us. Well, that's a very conservative estimation, I think. Certainly some of them would have survived that weren't allowed to survive for that reason. I mentioned I was supported by Christian Legal Centre, which is affiliated to Christian Concern, not a Catholic organisation, but a very devoted Christian organisation, who respond to anything that they consider to be unjust, especially in relation to Christian practice. You don't necessarily have to be a Christian to be supported. In fact, they've supported people who aren't Christian if they feel that they're victims of injustice. And Christian Legal Centre, within 2 days of hearing of my plight, because I had to inform some of the pro-life groups, sorry, we're not going to be taking any calls because of what's happening. Within 2 days, Christian Legal Centre had organised a Zoom meeting with myself and Eileen and some of their legal people. And they said, we're going to fight this all the way. And they did. They got a very good legal team together. They got an expert witness, and that was really important. Within 2 days, they got an expert witness report from a person who's not a Christian, not a Catholic, who performs abortions and is an eminent obstetrician in the south of England. And while he doesn't necessarily agree with the principles of why we were doing these things, he felt there's absolutely nothing wrong with what you're doing. And one by one, he looked at the allegations and he felt that they were ridiculous, that there was no substance to them, and certainly there was no proof or any evidence of anything to back any of the allegations. That was important. More importantly, we got witness statements from several of the women that we helped, and we got a variety. We could have got 40 or 50, but we chose 10. We got a mixture of some women who'd had their babies, some who were still pregnant and waiting to give birth, some women who tried the treatment and it didn't work, and even 2 of the women who decided, for whatever reason, according to themselves, that they weren't going to go ahead with the treatment, but they were so pleased and so grateful that somebody had taken the time to speak to them and to explain everything to them in a very honest and open fashion. So we got very good witness statements from all of these people. And we put this forward and nothing was happening. The GMC, they told us on a number of occasions, because we had to go to reviews of the tribunal every so often. And we're told, oh no, we don't look at the evidence, we're only looking at the allegations, which seems a very strange way to run a court. So we only look at allegations, that'll come later. And it would have been at least 18 months before they would have looked at it. So the Christian Legal Centre decided, okay, this is enough, we're going to go to the High Court. So they appealed to the High Court. And we expected that we wouldn't get an immediate hearing, that with COVID backlog and so on, we thought it's going to be a couple of years, maybe. But surprisingly, from our High Court application in October, I think towards the end of October 2021, we were given a date for the 24th of February 2022 to have a proper High Court hearing. Up until then, the GMC had absolutely no evidence, they had nothing to back anything, and then suddenly, in January 2022, so 9 months or 8 or 9 months later, they managed to get an expert witness on their side, who surprisingly almost backed to the hilt everything our expert witness had said, and he was very supportive of what we were doing, even though, again, he's not Christian, he's not Catholic, he does abortions, he's an obstetrician. So they couldn't find anyone in the country who didn't have a conflict of interest. They probably could have found someone in Mary Stokes or BPAS who would have supported them, but that would have been a major conflict of interest, I presume. But they couldn't find any other eminent expert witness to go against what we were doing. So his support was largely supportive. And then that was passed on then to along with all our evidence at last, to the investigators at GMC. And on so the court was due to be on the 24th of February, and on the 18th of February, they dropped the case. Everything was formally dropped. The conditions were revoked formally at that stage, and we were free to start again. Interestingly, Eileen's conditions weren't revoked until 6 or 7 weeks later, because she didn't have the threat of a High Court. Her legal people had said, oh, keep your head down, don't make this any worse, let's just see what happens, take it as it comes, hopefully it won't get any worse than what it is. So they didn't challenge it. So there was no great rush in her case, and there was no threat of a High Court appearance to the GMC at that point. Because you can't go to the High Court and the judge say, well, okay, show me your evidence. Say, well, we don't have any evidence, Your Honour, we're just here because we don't like what this guy's doing. You can't just go to a court. And I'm not a lawyer, but I presume that's not looked on favourably by judges. So since then we've been allowed, although we're a little bit cautious and we're trying to get it with some, we want to structure it better than the way we've been doing. It's not feasible probably for a population of 67 million to have 2 doctors on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to continue that service on an ongoing basis. So we are hoping to expand it and hoping that others will join us. We want to get the word out of what we've been doing. I would say that Eileen and myself, I qualified in 1989, Eileen qualified a few years later, but between the two of us we both agree that this is the most rewarding thing that we've ever done as doctors. Hopefully we've had lots of other people in various ways to the other things we've done, but this far and away is the most rewarding, the most emotionally demanding. The other thing I just want to say finally, as Angelo said, he's a hero, and thank you very much for that, but there shouldn't be what's so heroic about a doctor helping a patient looking for assistance? I mean, that should be a standard practice of every doctor. There shouldn't even be a story. I shouldn't be standing here. I shouldn't be speaking at the March for Life later on. So while I accept very much and I'm very grateful for all the support, but it's a story that shouldn't really be a story. It should be, oh, that's a woman needed help and there's a doctor who gave it to her. That should be the end of the story. Thank you. Sure, yeah, whatever.
Thank you, Dr. Dermot. It's true that medicine is about saving lives, but nowadays in hospitals we have something which is not medicine. Also the things which are not medicine. Anyway, do you want to ask any question? I'm sure you have plenty. Yeah, 1 or 2, yeah. Go.
I'm Dr. Dermot Kearney. I know Dermot. I've actually never met you in person. We've had lots of. So, if I could just say how proud we are as doctors of Dermot, an Irishman doing this in England, and of course Eileen is of Irish descent as well. So we are so proud of him. I met Dermot in the early stages. We have been trying to get the service launched in Ireland. Unfortunately, we can't do it for regulatory and insurance reasons, and there's a lot going on in the background that I can't tell you about. But I remember talking to Dermot in January 21, and you had just been discharged from hospital with COVID, and you could hardly speak.
Like today.
and we were trying to launch the service. We were trying to work between Ireland and the UK to get a service launched, and we will get going in Ireland, but not just yet. But I just want to say, and this is the issue for doctors, don't underestimate the stress of a medical council complaint. This went on for months and months in Dermot's case, and I know we were talking during it, how you kept calm, how you kept going, how you kept working, how you kept treating patients at that time. You're right. I mean, the toll that it takes on the family, on the, it's just extraordinarily stressful. And it comes down to an individual doctor, and that's what's going to happen in Ireland. It's going to be an individual doctor who's personally complained to the medical council. And we're all terrified of that, and we're all afraid of that. That's why we can't get it over the line. So, and the fact that they went for a Section 60, which is what we call it here as suspension, was that Dermot was such a threat to people, to women in the UK, that he had to be suspended immediately. That's what. I mean, that would be like, if a surgeon wasn't competent and, almost killed a patient or did kill a patient, you go for Section 60. So it was extraordinary what they were, the pressure that himself and Eileen were put under personally and their family as well. So we just, as a fellow doctor, I just want to say a huge thank you, and we are so proud of you, and you are an inspiration. We will get going in Ireland, but not just yet. We are doing work behind the scenes, so thanks, Dermot.
Thank you, Jane.
Just basic question. Have you many doctors in England now on your side since all this happened?
I have no idea. First of all, I had support from all over the world, and a lot from Ireland, so thank you all very much for that. Not many from there are some doctors, and there are some doctors, not many, but there are a small number who are outspoken about it. And I'd like to pay tribute. There's a doctor, keep an eye out for him, anyone who's interested in Prolife. Callum Miller. Anyone know Callum? Yeah. Callum is a genius. There is nobody on the pro-abortion side that could handle Callum in a debate.
Agreed.
He's just he's so clear, he's got such a memory, he could pull up anything to say, well, you know, and he could answer any question of it. So Callum's been very supportive, and Callum's not Catholic, he's a Christian, but he's not Catholic. So there are some people within the Catholic Medical Association, of which I'm a member, who are very supportive, but quietly, they don't want to raise their head above the parapet very much. Similarly with the Christian Medical Fellowship, there's lots of doctors in that, and they would be sympathetic but afraid to say very much. So we haven't had too much support from it.
Why should they be afraid now that this thing has been squashed?
Well, I don't know. I don't think they should be afraid. I don't think it's anything to be afraid of.
Okay.
But I can't tell people what to
They
do.
couldn't, yeah. Thank you.
Likewise, just raising the question of support from Catholic leaders, Irish Catholic clergy, nuns and priests and bishops and archbishops, and so on. I'm just raising that, and you know,
That's interesting because when the news came out of this first, of the allegations against us and the suspensions or the call for suspension, the Catholic Medical Association were quite supportive, but again they were being cautious because one of the allegations against us was that we were, in fact, Maria knows this because I sent her the letter. The Royal College of Surgeons actually took an enormous risk, and I think they still are taking enormous risk. In their letter of complaint, they said, we're not so much concerned about the treatment, that's a side issue. It's the people involved. One is the president of the Catholic Medical Association. That was me at the time. I've finished my term as president. So because they were identifying, because we were Catholic, that we were not to be trusted in providing care to vulnerable women. Now I think that was taking an enormous risk. But because they were trying to make this a religious issue, I specifically said, because in the Catholic Medical Association we have a spiritual advisor or a priest. And he offered, he said, I'll get the Archbishop, I'll get Cardinal Nichols involved and so on. I said, no, let's leave the religion aside for the moment. Okay, it's great to have in the background and pray as much as you can, but they want to make this a religious issue. Let's not fall into that trap. So that's why we specifically asked them not to be too outspoken in their support for us. But, you know, obviously we appreciate the support.
Just first of all to say, just to recap there, my understanding is you have this service in America.
Sorry?
The reverse that you have this service.
Oh yeah, that's
in
where it
America.
all started from.
Yeah, and now you're giving me really good hope because just listening to is it Deirdre there? You're to start this service in Ireland. Hopefully, yeah. I know you say you're working in the background. So that gives us hope coming here today because all I can tell you is there's an awful lot of apathy and sometimes we feel it ourselves, even just giving out the leaflets, you know what I mean, the pro-life leaflets. But to say today, you have given me a little bit more encouragement to keep fighting this good fight. And just to say, over 50 years ago, I was going to Liverpool in marches with Malcolm Muggeridge for this. You know, and that's over 50 years. It took America 50 years to overturn it. So we'll keep going. And thank you for that. And thank you to Deirdre as well to hear that good news.
Never give up. Good.
What's the possibility of integrating your service into the NHS proper? I know there might not be political will in the same way as there might be in America, but still there are like a decent amount of Conservative MPs I know.
It's a good question. Before we got involved with this, because it came through the Catholic Medical Association back in 2014, so 2 years after the Americans had set up their programme. We got an appeal from Jack Scarisbrick, the founder of Life, the organisation Life. He came to us to one of our meetings and said, we're hearing reports of the United States of women who've taken the first abortion pill, changed their mind, and they're managing to get treatment called progesterone that can help them save their baby. Could the Catholic Medical Association look into that, please? And we were all very sceptical. We thought, you know, is it dangerous? Is it going to work? You know, what will be, if the baby survives, what's going to be the effect? Because that's always, you know, thalidomide and all these things. And we're reassured so many years later, 8 years later, that that's not the case. But I looked into this for several years before we got involved. Then in 2018 we decided yes, because Claire McCulloch from Good Counsel, another pro-life, came to us with exactly the same plea, only more desperate this time, because she said more and more women are coming to us all the time looking for this help. Can you provide it? So we decided we're going to have to take this seriously, because there wasn't much information between 2014 and 2018. But by that stage there was papers starting to be published on it and we could look into it. I went to the US to meet some of the pioneers of it in 2018. Then we came back, we wrote to the General Medical Council, we wrote to the Royal College of Obstetricians, Royal College of GPs, the NHS England. We wrote to them saying, this is a great idea, here's how it works, here's the evidence behind it, please can we have some support for setting it up in the UK. We got back, the GMC came in actually, but the first three, we got back responses which were again totally inconsistent. Oh, we don't support things that are unlicensed. And we wrote back to them to say, well, actually, misoprostol's not licensed. But we got no reply the second time round. So we got all these excuses, so they wouldn't support it. We wrote to GMC. The GMC, interestingly, said, a woman has said, well, we can't speak on specific clinical situations. We can say that a woman or any patient is entitled to know all of the treatment options available to them at any stage, and they can change their mind at any stage and look at other options. And we thought, well, what's wrong with this? There's an evidence base behind it, it's safe, we're happy having looked at it for several years. So that's when we went ahead and then eventually organised it. So I'm in two minds, because while on the one hand I think it's a service that should be available for all women, the same way any other, well, not any other, but many other services that are available. So it should be, but for it to work properly, I think it needs people who are dedicated, who really want it to work. So I'm in two minds, so it would be great if, that we didn't have to take phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning or race to a pharmacy at 11:30 at night or whatever. It would be great if a woman could avail of the service much more easily than that. But I wouldn't like it to be just turning up a casualty and going to say, some going, it's another woman looking for this, we have to get this. So they have no sort of commitment to it or dedication to it. So I'm in two minds. It may eventually, I think it eventually will become part of a mainstream service, because some of you may know that progesterone has now been recommended, having been denied for years and years, it's now been recommended as the treatment for a woman who has suffered a previous miscarriage. Before, you had to suffer 3 or 4 miscarriages before you could even be considered for progesterone. So now they're saying, well, if a woman has had 1 miscarriage, she should be considered for it. Not necessarily given, but considered for progesterone. Because one of the causes of natural miscarriage, not all of them, but one of the causes is deficiency in progesterone or some problem with progesterone production. And in those cases, progesterone will work very well. And that's what we're doing, because medical abortions, if you like to call them that, are miscarriages being induced by a substance that blocks progesterone. So all we're doing is trying to correct that, in the same way that in some cases of natural miscarriage, progesterone can be the answer. And we're providing the exact same. So I think eventually it will be seen in that light, but it might take a few more years.
So much, I'm Catholic myself, but so much of the pro-life movement, what's happening at the moment in America and so on, has come outside of the Catholic, from Christian people,
Yeah.
fundamental Christian people, if you like, or people who just believe in life and are Christian belief, but they might mustn't different ways. Now, the same applies to the north of Ireland, which I found was a complete disgrace. When the leader of the DUP, the former leader, a lady, I can't remember her name for the moment, wants to keep abortion out of Northern Ireland. We had it here in the south. It wasn't available in the north, and she tried to keep it out of the north. And neither the SDLP or Sinn Féin would back her. Now I said, okay, Sinn Féin might be a bit extreme, but surely there were good Catholic people in the SDLP. There is a bridge we're talking about here between these Christian groups and Catholic groups. A pro-life bridge,
Yeah.
And that bridge should have been looked at more, but they were so deep in their historic differences that they couldn't see that bridge that could have been formed up in the north, and they might have kept abortion out of the north, and who've been as it's coming from America, thank God, so this bridge does exist outside, which a lot of push anti pro-life push is coming from outside of Catholicism, And I just think it's a pity it didn't happen in the north.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, the south and north and everything.
So you mentioned that a lot of the abortion providers and emergency departments were saying if a woman turned up who had changed her mind, that there's nothing they can do.
Yeah.
Has that changed, or do you think it might change, or can that be challenged even, that they're now giving false information? Like maybe you can't force them to tell them progesterone's available, but that maybe if, the same way that you were complaining for things, but actually to say, well, they're telling falsehoods now. Is that a possibility? I know it's all very early days, but
it is early, and
might...
the way the abortion pill by post thing has been made permanent now in the UK.
Yeah.
We're challenging that. We know we can't overturn it because it's been passed, but we want some modifications made. One of the things that we're asking for is that if a woman has been prescribed the pills by post, or even with a face-to-face contact, that she should be told that if she changes her mind, that there is. So we would like that. Again, the chance of that being successful, but we're asking for it. And there are some states in the United States, even before Roe v. Wade, there are some states where that's mandatory. There are things about 12 or 13 states where if a mother is getting the abortion pill, that she has to be informed that there is by law, that if you change your mind, and the brochure price don't like doing it, but they say, oh, I have to tell you this, blah, 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 and they read it out sort of
That's
mechanically.
great, because if people talk about informed consent and they talk about choice, I would hope again it could be a bridge.
Well, that's the ironic thing,
There
because
shouldn't be
the
an
code has
objection, so it's almost, we can get that out there, who can object if all the evidence comes out.
in the complaints we were referred to as the anti-choice, these anti-choice doctors. We were the ones respecting the choice.
Now it's
Maybe
starting
it
to go-
becomes common knowledge, you know, or in the press that people.
Yeah, we've
start
got to create
talking about it.
awareness, because we had some nasty press articles. The Guardian, the Independent, the Sunday Times had very bad articles written about us. None of them have apologised. The GMC hasn't apologised. We had some good press, mind you. The Mail on Sunday, the Daily Mail were very good to us. And I think the Telegraph and the Express wrote complimentary things. And Widdicombe had something. After the event. After the event, yeah. After the conditions were lifted.
It's 1:30, we have to go to the
have to
rally.
go to the rally.
So, on behalf of Family Solidarity, thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, was that okay?
Wonderful.